So there was one other person that influenced Darwin, and that is this individual here, Thomas Malthus. Now, Thomas Malthus was not a scientist. As you can see, I've got down there, he was an economist. Malthus wrote the essay on the principle of population. So what was the essay of the principle of population? Darwin came across this kind of by accident, but this was mainly written as far as human-type populations. And the idea is that populations grow faster than food and shelter and water supplies are available. And so the idea is that there's not ever going to be enough of food, water, shelter available for the populations, and so there's always going to be somebody dying. That's the idea of Malthus's essay. And so Darwin realized that he could apply this to things that he was seeing in nature, and that anything that was favorable, things that benefited an organism as far as them being able to get food, water, or shelter, would be preserved or kept because it would allow them to survive and reproduce. And so it was kind of one of the last, aha, this helps my whole idea work. So he had all these other pieces and parts that he'd been putting together, the different variations like on the finches and, you know, organisms that had disappeared like the glyptodonts, and the information from Cuvier like, you know, ground sloths and so forth that had been disappearing. And then this idea that there's a reason why some of these characteristics, some of these traits had disappeared. This idea that Malthus had of there not being enough food, water, shelter available. So he wrote his first draft in 1842 and started working on, you know, getting it all together, and then realized that maybe it would not be the best idea to publish it. And so it sat for 14 years in one of his drawers. He basically thought maybe it might be more than, you know, he was ready to put out there. Most people don't realize Darwin was an incredibly religious man. And in the time, this was a very controversial type of idea for the scientific community. It was going to be a big change from what had already come before. But in 1859, he did publish his book on the origin of the species. Any idea why he would suddenly publish his book? If you guessed because somebody else came up with the idea, you are correct. So Alfred Russel Wallace, most people have never heard of him unless you've been in biology. He actually independently came up with the process of evolution by natural selection in 1858, and he actually wrote to Darwin with his idea, and he actually worked in Malaysia, so a different area of the world, and he had read Malthus's book as well, and sent this stuff to Darwin because he knew Darwin was interested in some of this sort of stuff, and said, hey, you know, if you think this is worth publishing, can you publish it? And Darwin was like, I think I'm going to go ahead and publish mine. And so he went ahead and published it. The thing is that they actually both presented the idea at the scientific conference of the time. They are actually both credited with the idea of evolution by natural selection. However, Darwin is the one that gets the credit as far as the fact that he's the one that published his book. So the book is On the Origin of the Species, and it's Evolution by Natural Selection. It sold out on its first day, and you can see down there at the bottom, it made huge changes to our view of the world, as far as how organisms change, how old the world is, because in order for this to work, it definitely has to be older than 6,000 years old, in order for all these organisms to make it through this process of evolution. The only issue was that he didn't have the actual mechanism. He didn't know about things like genetics at the time. So, all right. So the next section is going to be on the mechanisms of evolution. So there are 4 different ways that we can get that genetic change.